Nightline, President Trump and Russian President Putin are set to meet in just 4 days. Friday's highly anticipated summit in Alaska will be the first time Vladimir Putin sets foot on U.S. soil in a decade. Now, European leaders are warning Trump and Putin peace talks must include Ukraine. Let's bring in former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired General Wesley Clark, for more. General Clark, thanks for coming on. We just heard the president alluding to wanting Zelensky to be in a future meeting with Putin, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen this time around. So what do you think's at stake for this summit on Friday?
I think this is a sort of, I think it's a publicity effort to sort of get some momentum behind President Trump's efforts to end the war. Clearly, it's getting a lot of attention. But there's no indication, at least in Russian activities or anything the Russians have said, that they're going to change their objectives. So the actual practical impact of this is probably nil at this time. But it's certainly going to generate a lot of interest. It's going to attract a lot of concern, bringing Putin to American soil. He's an indicted war criminal. He is the leader of an aggressor nation. He launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine. And so all of these are sort of it's the unconventional way that President Trump is going to try to go after this. There's no work done at the bottom to make sure there's a positive outcome of this. It's like when he went to North Korea or met with Kim Jong-un somewhere else and tried to set up an agreement. There's a lot of showmanship involved. There's a lot of personal effort involved by the president. But will it bring concrete results? Not clear. It's not clear that the Ukrainian military is going to go along with any surrender of territory. Certainly some of the territory they're currently defending is critical because they can't fall back and reestablish those defensive fortifications easily. And there's no indication that although President Trump said we're going to try to get oceanfront property, we don't know what that means. If that means Ukraine might get a piece of Crimea, sure, that could be very interesting for Ukraine. But there's no indication that President Putin's going to go along with this, and every indication that he's building up his military forces to continue the struggle against Ukraine and NATO elsewhere.
Do you think President Trump should be having this summit with Vladimir Putin?
I don't think you can ever say you shouldn't talk to an adversary. But let's be clear. President Putin sees the United States as an adversary. He sees NATO as an adversary. Russian commentary says they're at war with NATO right now. So although President Trump believes he's got some kind of a relationship with Putin, fine. Go ahead and talk. There's no issue with that. Talk anywhere you want. Talk about anything you want. But understand, these people in Ukraine, they're fighting for American values. They're fighting for what we've represented for 75 years in the post-World War II environment. And so you've got to support their urge, their fight for freedom and democracy. That's what America stands for. You can't give it away. So have the talk. Maybe Putin does want to end the war, or at least get a pause. Ukraine's going to need security guarantees if that happens. Those haven't been discussed. So there's a lot that remains undeveloped here. But talk, sure. Go ahead.
A source tells ABC News President Trump is also sending Special Envoy General Keith Kellogg to Kyiv. What do you make of the timing there? What do you think he's hoping to accomplish?
Well, I think he's hoping to have some influence on the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military is really a hard line on this. They're the ones who sacrificed from the beginning, really from 2014 when all of this began to unfold. So they fought an 8-year war before Putin ever invaded in 2022. They lost some 10,000 soldiers on the front lines defending where their positions were in Donbass and Luhansk. And so they're long-term committed to this. They're patriots, and I think they understand as clearly as everyone does in Ukraine that were Ukraine to fall, were it to come under the Russian umbrella, there would be a massive ethnic cleansing, liquidation, murder of people who supported the current regime, a big refugee outflow, and an enormous impact on global stability and economic prosperity in Europe and abroad. So the Ukrainian military is really the key element in this, They're standing firm. They're not going to give up territory. And I'm sure that's why General Kellogg's going over there to be with them.
The U.S. ambassador to NATO says this summit between Trump and Putin sets the groundwork for a peace agreement. Sounds like you don't see it as being so consequential. So what comes next? What comes after these talks?
Well, it really depends on the outcome of the talk. You know, as I've looked at this over the years, Putin still believes he's going to win militarily. So he's always willing to engage in a diplomatic foray. It stalls off sanctions. And President Trump's under the belief that if you're tough on Russia, then you can't negotiate with Russia. You know, this is not the historical experience. Russia believes in being tough to get into negotiations. And the only way we've ever been successful is to be equally tough in those military activities while we negotiate. So President Trump's got a different proposal here. I think Secretary General of NATO is very hopeful. I hope this does form a foundation. But I think we have to recognize that President Putin doesn't seem to be willing to compromise on his long-term objectives. That's all of Ukraine, that's the Baltic countries, and that's breaking up really the role of the United States and NATO in assuring stability in Europe.
All right, General Wesley Clark, we appreciate your time today as always. Thank you.